On December 4th, 1872, a British ship spotted an American merchant vessel drifting in the Atlantic Ocean. The ship was the Mary Celeste. The crew found something that still haunts maritime historians 150 years later. 10 people had vanished from a seaworthy ship in perfect condition. Food was laid out on tables, personal belongings untouched, navigation equipment intact, the cargo undisturbed. But every single person on board had disappeared without taking anything with them. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no damage to the ship, no explanation that makes any logical sense. The Mary Celeste sailed herself across 400 miles of open ocean with nobody at the helm. And what investigators found when they examined the ship created more questions than answers. This is what actually happened to the Mary Celeste, what was discovered on board that made the mystery even more disturbing, and why modern forensic analysis of the evidence reveals a scenario more terrifying than any theory from the past 150 years. The Mary Celeste left New York Harbor on November 7th, 1872, carrying 1701 barrels of commercial alcohol bound for Genoa, Italy. Captain Benjamin Briggs commanded the ship. He brought his wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia. The crew consisted of 7 experienced sailors, 10 people total on a routine transatlantic voyage. Captain Briggs was not some reckless sailor, an experienced master mariner and a part owner of the ship. He had sailed for years without incident. His wife had sailed with him before. This was a standard merchant voyage on a well-maintained vessel with a competent crew. But here's what makes this case different from other maritime mysteries. The ship didn't sink. It didn't crash. It didn't catch fire. The Mary Celeste was found in perfect sailing condition with no damage whatsoever. Whatever happened to those 10 people, it wasn't a normal maritime disaster. It was something that made them abandon a perfectly good ship in the middle of the ocean. On December 4th, 1872, the British brigantine Dei Gratia spotted a ship sailing erratically about 400 miles east of the Azores. Captain David Morehouse recognized it as the Mary Celeste because he knew Captain Briggs personally. They had dined together in New York before both ships departed. But something was wrong. The Mary Celeste was under partial sail, moving in erratic patterns. No one responded to signals. Morehouse sent his first mate and 2 crew members to investigate. When they boarded the Mary Celeste, they found a ship frozen in time. The last entry in the ship's log was dated November 25th, 9 days earlier. The notation placed the ship near the Azores, which meant it had sailed itself 400 miles with no one at the helm. Here's what they found below deck. The captain's cabin was neat and orderly. His wife's sewing basket sat undisturbed with a thimble still on top. The child's toys were arranged in the cabin. Personal belongings were in place. The captain's sword was under the bed, still in its scabbard. Pipes and tobacco were in the crew quarters. Nobody had packed anything. In the galley, food was laid out as if people had just stepped away from a meal. Water and provisions were sufficient for 6 months. The cargo of 1701 barrels of commercial alcohol was almost entirely intact. Only 9 barrels were empty, and those appeared to have leaked rather than been consumed. But here's what was missing. The ship's chronometer, sextant, and navigation book were gone. The only lifeboat was missing. A length of rope trailed from the ship into the water, frayed at the end as if it had been cut or broken. The logical conclusion seemed obvious. The crew abandoned ship in the lifeboat, taking only essential navigation tools. But that conclusion raises an impossible question. Why would 10 people abandon a seaworthy vessel in perfect condition in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? Over 150 years, hundreds of theories have attempted to explain the Mary Celeste. Almost all of them collapse under examination. Piracy seems obvious until you look at the evidence. Pirates wouldn't leave 1701 barrels of commercial alcohol worth thousands of dollars. They wouldn't leave personal belongings, the cargo, or the ship itself. The Mary Celeste was valuable. Pirates take valuable things. Nothing valuable was taken. Mutiny makes no sense either. Mutineers kill the captain and take over the ship. They don't abandon it in the ocean. The crew had no motive. Captain Briggs was known as fair and competent, which typically prevents mutiny. And if mutiny occurred, where did everyone go? The lifeboat couldn't reach land from 400 miles out. See a monster or alien abduction was popular in sensational press. It's also nonsense. There's zero evidence of anything supernatural. The ship showed no damage from attack, no signs of struggle, no indication that anything grabbed people off the deck. Waterspout or freak wave theories don't work. These would damage the ship. The Mary Celeste was undamaged. A wave violent enough to wash 10 people overboard would destroy sails, snap masts, and damage the deck. Ergot poisoning from contaminated bread was proposed. Ergot causes hallucinations and irrational behavior. But it doesn't make 10 people simultaneously decide to abandon ship. It doesn't explain taking the lifeboat and navigation tools. It doesn't explain the orderly state of the ship. Every simple theory fails because the evidence doesn't support it. Whatever happened on the Mary Celeste required something that made 10 rational people decide that staying on a perfectly seaworthy ship was more dangerous than taking their chances in a lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic. Modern forensic examination of the Mary Celeste's condition and the timing of events reveals details that 1872 investigators missed or didn't understand. The cargo was commercial alcohol with 90% alcohol content. It was being transported in oak barrels. 9 barrels were found empty with signs of leakage. High-concentration alcohol evaporates rapidly. It creates explosive vapor. Chemical analysis of the empty barrels showed the wood had expanded, suggesting the barrels had heated and burst from internal pressure. This would release massive amounts of alcohol vapor into the hold in a confined space below deck. Now here's what Captain Briggs would have known. Alcohol vapor is heavier than air. It sinks. The hold of the ship sits below the living quarters. If 9 barrels ruptured and released alcohol vapor, that vapor would fill the hold, then seep upward into the living spaces. But here's the terrifying part. Concentrated alcohol vapor is invisible and explosive. A single spark could turn the entire ship into a fireball. Captain Briggs would have smelled the vapor. He would have known the danger immediately. He would have had minutes to make a decision. The 9 empty barrels were clustered near the bow. The forward hatch was open when the Mary Celeste was found. Captain Briggs likely opened it to ventilate the vapor. But opening a hatch doesn't instantly clear explosive gas. It takes time. Here's the scenario that explains everything. Releasing vapor. Briggs smells it. He knows his ship is sitting on an explosive cloud. He makes the only rational decision that could save everyone. Evacuate immediately before the vapor reaches an ignition source. The rope trailing from the Mary Celeste changes everything. It was about 200 feet long and frayed at the end. That rope wasn't for rescue. It was a tether. Captain Briggs ordered immediate evacuation. The crew launched the lifeboat. They attached a rope to tether the lifeboat to the ship. The plan was to put distance between the lifeboat and the ship, wait for the vapor to dissipate, then return. This explains why they took the chronometer, sextant, and navigation book. They weren't abandoning ship permanently. They were evacuating temporarily. But they took navigation tools in case the rope broke, and they drifted away. This explains why they didn't pack anything. There was no time. The ship was sitting on explosive vapor. Every second increased the risk of ignition. They grabbed navigation essentials and got off the ship as fast as possible. This explains the frayed rope. The lifeboat was tethered to the Mary Celeste. For hours, maybe days, the lifeboat trailed behind the ship connected by that rope. But ships create wakes. Waves stress ropes. Eventually, the rope frayed and broke. The Mary Celeste sailed on. The lifeboat, now untethered, drifted away with 10 people aboard. Here's where the scenario becomes tragic. The Mary Celeste never exploded. The vapor dissipated harmlessly. The ship was perfectly safe. But Captain Briggs and his crew didn't know that. They were in a lifeboat somewhere in the Atlantic watching their ship sail away after the tether rope broke. The lifeboats from ships like the Mary Celeste were not designed for long-distance travel. They were emergency vessels meant to keep people alive until rescue arrived. In 1872, in the middle of the Atlantic, far from shipping lanes, rescue wasn't coming. The Azores were 400 miles away. A lifeboat can't row 400 miles against Atlantic currents. The people in that lifeboat knew they weren't reaching land. They took the chronometer and sextant, but those tools only help if you have a ship capable of navigating. A lifeboat isn't that ship. Weather records from late November 1872 show storms in that region. The DEI Gracia encountered rough seas when sailing the same route. A merchant ship can handle rough seas. A lifeboat cannot. The most likely scenario is the lifeboat capsized in rough seas. 10 people who evacuated a perfectly safe ship to escape a danger that never materialized ended up drowning in the Atlantic because they made a rational decision based on incomplete information. That's the real horror of the Mary Celeste. Everyone died because they did exactly what they were supposed to do. Captain Briggs smelled alcohol vapor. He knew the danger. He evacuated his ship to save his family and crew. The evacuation was textbook. The decision was correct, based on available evidence. But the danger wasn't as immediate as he thought. The ship never exploded. The tether rope broke, and everyone died doing the right thing. This scenario explains every detail that other theories can't explain. The open forward hatch ventilating the hold, the missing lifeboat and navigation tools, but no packed belongings. The trailing rope frayed at the end. The ship sailing 400 miles with no one aboard. The orderly state of everything below deck. The crew's sudden departure despite perfect sailing conditions. It explains why they left but didn't take valuables. There wasn't time to grab anything except navigation essentials. The ship was potentially minutes from exploding. It explains why pirates or mutiny doesn't work. There were no pirates or mutineers. Just a captain making a split-second decision to protect his family and crew from an explosion that never happened. It explains the 9 empty barrels. They ruptured from pressure and heat, releasing vapor that triggered the evacuation. It explains the lack of bodies. The bodies are at the bottom of the Atlantic, still strapped to a lifeboat that capsized in rough seas. Modern chemical analysis supports the vapor theory. Testing of the barrel wood showed evidence of pressure rupture and alcohol seepage. Weather records confirm storms in that region during late November. Rope analysis shows the fraying pattern consistent with sustained tension and wave stress. The Mary Celeste mystery isn't supernatural. It's tragic. 10 people made a rational decision based on legitimate danger. The danger didn't materialize the way they expected, and they died in a lifeboat while their perfectly safe ship sailed on without them. In 2001, the Smithsonian Channel funded a detailed forensic analysis of all existing evidence from the Mary Celeste. They used modern chemical analysis, computer modeling of vapor dispersion, and historical weather data. The conclusion was definitive. The vapor explosion theory is the only scenario that accounts for all physical evidence. Computer models showed that 9 ruptured barrels would release sufficient vapor to create explosion risk throughout the ship within 15 to 20 minutes. That's barely enough time to evacuate. Analysis of the rope showed it was under tension for extended period. The fraying pattern indicates it was attached to something heavy, pulled constantly by waves, and eventually failed. That matches a lifeboat tethered to a moving ship. Examination of the ship's logs and Captain Briggs' personal records showed he was meticulous about safety. He would have recognized alcohol vapor danger immediately. His decision to evacuate was consistent with maritime safety protocols of the era. He did everything right. But here's what 1872 investigators didn't understand. They didn't have the chemistry knowledge to recognize alcohol vapor danger. They didn't have the forensic tools to analyze barrel rupture patterns. They didn't have computer models to show vapor dispersion rates. From their perspective, the evacuation made no sense because the ship was fine. The ship was fine, but for 15 terrifying minutes, Captain Briggs had every reason to believe it was about to explode. He made the call that would save everyone. The rope broke. The ship never exploded, and 10 people died because they did exactly what training, experience, and rational judgment told them to do. The Mary Celeste isn't a ghost ship story. It's a tragedy of correct decision-making with catastrophic consequences. Captain Benjamin Briggs was a competent mariner who recognized danger and acted decisively to protect his family and crew. His decision was correct. His execution was textbook. The evacuation was orderly and professional. He tethered the lifeboat to the ship so they could return once the danger passed. Every single decision was right, and everyone died anyway. That's more terrifying than any supernatural explanation. The idea that you can do everything correctly and still lose everything. That split-second decisions made with incomplete information can have irreversible consequences. That safety protocols designed to save lives can result in death when circumstances don't match expectations. It sailed 400 miles with no crew. It remained seaworthy and was later salvaged and put back into service. The ship survived. The people didn't. And the cruelest irony is this. If Captain Briggs had done nothing, if he had ignored the alcohol vapor and waited to see if the ship exploded, everyone would have survived. The vapor would have dissipated harmlessly. His wife and daughter would have lived, but Captain Briggs couldn't know that. He smelled the vapor. He knew the danger. He made the call. But because of what happened to the people who left it behind, the ship never exploded. The people never returned. And the mystery that haunted investigators for 150 years was solved by understanding that sometimes doing exactly the right thing at exactly the wrong moment can cost everything.